Welcome, everyone. We are extremely excited to be here today with Barbara Heil-Sonic from Design to Sell. Barbara is an extremely experienced home stager, designer, and she's here to talk to us a little bit about color trends and tips for preparing homes to lease and to sell. Barbara is an expert on short-term rentals. So a little bit about Barbara and her team. They have been called, I love this by the way, you guys have been called the secret weapon and the closer on many deals. So I'm excited already. She believes in a 10 times mindset and urges followers and listeners to rise above the norm, aligning with the right partners, the right teams, and core values she says are key. You need to get out there and be uncomfortable. That is when growth happens. I absolutely agree with that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very excited to be here.
Well, we're really excited to have you here with us. So right off the bat, talking about short-term rentals, we have a number of investors who follow us, real estate professionals, of course, who follow us, a lot of real estate agents themselves, investors, and they are very interested in short-term rentals. What are the differences between short-term rentals and your traditional for-sale property when it comes to home staging?
Absolutely a great question to ask. And I think, one of the key differentiation between staging a home for sale and preparing a short-term rental and furnishing a short-term rental is that the furniture is really more hospitality driven, versus for staging, we're looking a lot for the pure look. So if you think about a sofa, in home staging, we're going for the lighter color and, how everything flows, because there you easily can always utilize, and we'll talk later about design trends and color, pillows and colors, because it's a neutral backdrop. When we're talking about, and of course, we don't want to have it too heavy because it is moving, because a lot of logistics, furniture moves in and out of houses.
Right.
When we're picking inventory for short-term rental, we're thinking about comfort. It's about hospitality, because people sit on the sofa, they want to feel comfortable in it. So here it is more about comfort, and we might not choose the lighter colors per se. We might go for a little bit color and fun, because at the end it is a design style statement for that specific property. Versus when you're thinking about, and I'm talking here specifically inventory for vacant staging or staging, you go more neutral, because you want to have a neutral backdrop and then bring in the color with accent, pillows, art, possibly rugs. Awesome. So one part is a design, lifestyle experience, more photography and more a look experience, versus when we're thinking about the short-term rentals, it is a true live-in and, and comfort experience.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Well, you mentioned color a couple of times, and I always get excited every year to hear about what the color of the year is going to be. A lot of these big paint companies will have their own color of the year, and of course, as real estate professionals, we're interested in that too, because it may be a color that we start seeing, or we may recommend that sellers or property owners paint in their homes. So what can you tell us about the trends for 2023?
Absolutely excited to share a little bit more here. And when we're talking about trends, the interesting part is the trend is only like a perception, kind of like a concept we're seeing moving forward, or is a projection. Then reality kicks in. It shows then which colors really will stick. So as we're looking at trends, it is trying to get a perception. It is a reflection of how things in our universe are changing as well.
Right.
What I always love to share is that when we're thinking about how color and trends are developed, they're originally coming from the automotive industry. And that's where a lot of colors for cars, like setting a certain element. So we see that happening. And then, of course, the runway has a certain impact as well. And then when we're looking at trends in the US, often, they are more coming from the West Coast and over time trickling over to the East Coast. So that's in general, like a little bit on the background. I love to look at the trends as an indicator because most likely we will see this influence as we go shopping at Las Vegas Furniture Market or High Point Market, or even here in Atlanta at the Mart. We know and understand that most probably this will be the colors coming, and we will see more pops of that in artwork and or accents. Sometimes we will see it more embedded in furniture as well. But again, from a staging perspective, we're trying to stay more neutral and utilizing, again, the pillows and the accents, bringing color in. If I look at the color trends for this year, Benjamin, and then, of course, everybody has it, right? So the interesting part is it's not the same. It's not purely one color because every paint company has their expert team and bringing their color, ideas together. And so I look at the colors in reflection to what might make sense for us in the staging business. And we might use it as like an inspiration and idea. If it is too extreme, we might only use a couple of things where, where we have the right property where that might fit. But we might not go full blown and suddenly change everything because now indigo might be a good one. So when we're looking at the more blush and pinkish undertones and the mauve, trends we're seeing at Benjamin Moore and even Sherwin-Williams, most likely that is not the color we would utilize and buy into inventory in our staging business. It might be fun utilizing it in a short-term rental though, because again, it depends, but all depends on the target audience and how vibrant you want to go. Is it a short-term rental where you want to stand out because it's really a statement of lifestyle and color and a certain trend you're going for? Or is your short-term rental more a statement over a longevity of time? Then similar rules would apply in the selection of the inventory. We would go on the basis more neutral and bring in a little of fun. However, if you want to make a statement, we might pick an indigo sofa or a velvet color or certain patterns which are a little bit more funky and unique. And again, that's sometimes the fun part. On the staging side, we always would stay more neutral because we have to think about longevity. And so I think that's one of the differences. And I think for our design teams and people working in the industry, it's actually fun to have that, have both, have the opportunity to work a little bit more with color and fun, but truly understanding how we purchase and what the purchase strategy is for inventory from a staging perspective.
Right. Well, I love the way that you explain that. It's interesting how things move from the automotive industry. I would never have thought that. To the runway, a little more likely, then West Coast and over to the East Coast. Sounds like a little bit more fun could be had maybe in the short-term rental if you want to be a little more daring with your colors. Now, one question I will get sometimes as a broker is questions about are white kitchens and agreeable gray going to still be the thing? Because those have been, gray and white, have been pretty popular for a number of years now. Are those colors and tones things that we can expect to see moving into the next year, you think?
And the interesting part is that it always takes a while until a certain trend is leaving. We're getting indications. For example, for a while we saw a lot of the farmhouse style, and the farmhouse style, by definition, is on the way out. However, we won't see it completely changing the market in 2023 because a lot of the houses are still built in a certain style and in that style. And, here in our area, people love it.
Right.
So it will take longer. However, when I'm thinking again about, what new inventory we're purchasing and, what are the trends there, we might not buy into that per se. We're going already a little bit more where the new trends are moving because, for the longevity there as well. So I see agreeable gray still being a color because it has some of the warm undertones. We definitely see a lot of white. We definitely see the cooler gray colors leaving. So we won't see a lot of that. And we have definitely a lot of more introduction on color pops, because I think it's the nature. After we have seen a lot of the neutrals, there's a yearning for some change and more vibrant. So we have a little bit more pops on vibrant colors coming in. But still, the maturity I see coming really as accents and not as much on the walls. However, we see a trend back there too into wallpaper. So I think the color comes in maybe on one accent wall, on one specific wall. I can see that if it is embedded in the overall design concept.
Nice. And I have seen that on your website, Home Design to Sell. And that's the number 2.com, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Perfect.
And the website's great. I'm going to mention the website a little bit later, too, because you guys have a fantastic blog. Photos are beautiful. And I did notice that about the pictures, that it would be a beautiful neutral palette and pops of colors in the pillows on the sofas and maybe on a few other things. You mentioned wallpaper, though. Now, a lot of people cringe when we talk about wallpaper. And a couple years back, and every so often I hear wallpaper's coming back, What do you see with wallpaper?
Well, it's definitely coming back, and in different shapes and versions as well. What is interesting now that even when you go to one of the big box stores like Home Depot and or Lowe's, you see a variation of different wallpapers for accents. Even some of that can be used on furniture. Some can be used now even at backsplashes. So there's a lot of interesting new ideas, I think, popping up, and could be a certain element of fun. Of course, all depends on the price point of the property and what you would use and or not. But wallpaper definitely is coming back. And I think specifically, again, for short-term rentals, one part and one focus area is Instagrammable moments.
Yeah.
So you want to have people taking pictures. We mentioned and talked about that we are running our own short-term rentals as well. Ours are very dog-friendly. So we invite everybody in to take some pictures of their dogs in the yard. They have fun.
Aww.
So we have a lot of fun elements for the dogs there. And again, this is an Instagrammable moment. Other part is if you have an accent wall, and it is specific to the design concept of your short-term rental, and you will ask people to maybe take a little picture, and you can utilize it for marketing purposes, and you want that people talk about something,
right?
And you want to stand out. So that's a USP, a unique selling proposition for the property as well, and a nice marketing tool for your hashtags.
Right. I love that. I love that you love animals. Atlanta's a very dog-friendly city, so I think that is a wonderful thing. And talking about Instagram and the fact that most buyers, future tenants, even tenants for short-term rentals, they're looking at properties online. Lighting matters.
Absolutely.
Right? A huge deal in photographs. So what tips can you offer us for lighting a property?
Well, lighting is key element, and that is the same for staging and for short-term rentals, because it is setting the mood. Lighting always sets the mood. So finding the right light bulbs in the right lighting in a space makes a huge difference. And again, a couple of tips and tricks there too. If there is not enough lighting in a space, a good suggestion is to utilize a mirror to expand the light flow into that space. So, and therefore, it feels like there's a second window, even so it might not be there.
Right.
So that's a good part. Then the other element is additional light sources. And that is, normally we have the light source, which is the outside light, and then we have the overhead lighting. And then are the secondary lightings next to the sofa, reading nook. So that is important. Key is that the light source always should have the same hue. So kind of the intensity of the light should be very similar, which means we don't want to have, too much of a yellow type of a bulb conflicting with like a very, cool color bulb. So we want to make sure that the feel in the space is the same.
Some uniformity
Exactly.
there. Now, we talked a little bit off camera about smart lighting in Hue. I'm a big fan of Hue smart lighting personally, but one thing that I like about it is not only can you have fun, you can change colors, but talking about just the hue of white lighting and how some can be more yellow, some can be more true white or a little bit more blue. You have a lot of control with smart lighting for sure.
Absolutely, because you can adjust, it to your liking. So that's the main part. When we're looking about, bathrooms and, looking at lighting there too, often, light is a little bit lighter. Sometimes it can get too harsh. So if you're thinking about lifestyle, and that's more when we're talking about staging, a lot of elements play in on photography, right? It's not that somebody is standing in front of the mirror and is putting the makeup on.
Right.
So that's a little bit a different situation. However, the best light is actually just before the sunset on a beautiful day, because it is a soft light which makes everybody really look its best. And, we like to look in the mirror and have a nice reflection of looking the best we can. And some of the lights, when I go and when I'm traveling, can be very disturbing, right?
Yeah, I
They
can
are
imagine.
very, very harsh. So, and again, it's all about feeling and lifestyle, right? So
Right.
that's like all of these little clues when you're thinking about how and what type of lighting you are also establishing in the space. To keep that in mind. In regards to the smart lights, what is great now is we have even rechargeable light bulbs. So if you need a light source in a space where you cannot run a cable, and or a cable would really be a hazard to people for safety reasons, you can have some rechargeable light bulbs and can have a standing lamp there without even needing a cable. So that's
Yeah.
a new fantastic little opportunity there. Of course, it requires some maintenance, because at a certain point it might run out and it needs to be recharged.
Right.
Again, have to think about your target audience and how you describe it and utilize it. Now, same is that often this whole smart lights next to the beds. You definitely want to make sure that you have the USB charger right next to it. Also allows that people might not leave their charger and forget them behind the bed, because that's where the plug is, which is not a nice experience if you're leaving and leave something behind. And little things like that can be kind of like, very costly to send them back to you, because it's not only that somebody lives there and you're putting it in an envelope, you have to pay somebody else,
Right.
your cleaning service or another service person afterwards to get it, drive it to the little office and send it back to you.
Right. Well, you're full of excellent tips. And so neutral is a good way to go, it sounds like. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was adding personality through window treatments. Because depending on the space, a minimalist bare look may look fantastic. But it is a way you can add personality when you're talking about maybe whatever type of window treatment, for everywhere from hardware to drapery, I would imagine. What tips can you offer us in terms of window treatments and hardware?
So window treatments, and again here I'm talking about short-term rentals,
Sure.
is a key element as well. Number one, it's an element of privacy, so we have to consider that. So who could see in or look in or out of the window? That's number one.
Okay.
Light flow, because we have to assess what's the situation in that specific room, and would it make the whole space darker and or not, so that defines what we're choosing. However, in bedrooms, ideally you want to have some blackout windows. A lot of people like to sleep in the dark, so that's most probably a safe part. Might not be the ideal design decision behind that, but that would be most probably a suggestion from a hospitality standpoint, that you really can, similar what you find in hotels as well. You have the opportunity of the blackout windows, and then they have additional options for some shears, in combination with that. Often there's even a third option on top, which is more than a colorful type of fabric you can use to increase the fun in the space.
Nice. Now, I know I mentioned hardware, and we haven't really talked about that before, but are you seeing any trends in, for example, chrome versus more of a oil rubbed bronze look, the darker look? Is there anything in that arena that we should consider?
Well, a part is like, the matte brush gold has been now around for a little while. I still see that specifically or maybe more in higher end installations and or some fun installations as well. And part is there's a repeat factor. We still see it on furniture. There's still a lot of that part, but I don't see it as a strong trend, me personally.
Right.
I can always be proven wrong because a trend, is there, and that it depends how many people are buying into that over time.
Right.
The brushed one, for sure. I know for years back, we had really that gold rush.
Yeah.
And that one is one we absolutely replace right now,
Right.
because it dates properties, for sure. What we see more and more is really a mix of finishes and hardware. So it doesn't mean, if you choose like a chrome light fixture, everything else has to be chrome. The most important part is how are the metals mixing and matching. So it's again comes down to the choices. And sometimes you even have mixed metal where you have two different ones, even in one product.
Right.
And so you go both ways, which I think is fun too. It gives much more opportunity. And so it is a more designed look and feel.
Right. I'm so glad you just said that. So many of us think that if we start with, let's say, one finish on door handles, that we have to be exactly consistent throughout the whole home with that same finish. And I appreciate that you give us permission to have a little fun with that.
Yeah, well, and again, it has to flow together. It cannot be a disruption. It's the same when we're in a house and there's a renovation and suddenly you feel it's a complete different look and feel, and it feels like it's a different house.
Right.
So suddenly you're moving
Disconnected.
from a disconnect. And again, that is even more important when we're talking about the staging, because it's the flow of the picture. But even for short-term rentals, there's a story to tell. And the story has to flow. You can be unique, but then the whole concept has to be unique.
Right.
If you want to be in Princess World and in Mad Men and whatever else, together, that's, you have to market it accordingly.
Right. I love the idea of telling a story too. That's awesome. Now, outdoor spaces. So many properties have outdoor spaces. Sometimes people will try to capitalize on that. Sometimes folks will tend to ignore it just a little bit. So what advice can you give property owners who have outdoor spaces? And we can talk about this in terms of a short-term rental and then also just in general if you want to.
Well, specifically here, people love the opportunity to utilize outdoor spaces. And specifically, I think in the last 2 years, after the last 2 years of the pandemic, people are really eager to also utilize the outside. We have seen the trend that much more people are outside, more hiking, more outside activity. And it's wonderful to see, me originally, and again, normally I make always the joke, I'm a very southern girl, right? Southern Germany, that's where I'm originally from. And that's where the funny accent is coming from too. So just if anybody was wondering.
You have a beautiful accent, though. I love to hear you speak.
So there is a lot of outdoor activity. And people are, in the streets, the cafes, you sit, you watch, but it's much more walking and walkability. And I really love seeing that concept comes more and more. We can see it more and more here as well. We have other walkable cities throughout the US, but Atlanta has started, to turn corners there as well. So that is important, as is your outdoor space. People enjoy it, and highlighting that is a key part. When there's the opportunity, people like to sit out. They want to sit, they want to grill. It's the entertainment factor. So setting it up appropriate is good. And even if you have a larger backyard and an opportunity to maybe showcase a small fire pit and putting 4 chairs around it is not a huge investment. Think about, it's marketing a property for sale. From a short-term rental perspective, it is setting opportunities where people can entertain and sit outside around the fire. So
Right.
specifically in mountain properties, it is a key part to have this opportunity. People like, it's like the marshmallows, setting it up and creating a lifestyle there
Right.
for the guests.
And with so many properties, it's front and center. A lot of townhomes, you walk in, main level, it's got the deck or whatever, it's just right there, so you can't really ignore it. So having it look nice and inviting, I can see is
and
important.
sometimes, and again, for staging under that concept, less is more, and understanding that 99% of people search online, it is emotional clues. It's again, and I know you like it, but I repeat it again, it's the storytelling of the property.
Yeah.
So there's the little, a little outside area, maybe a little bistro set, inviting in, if that makes sense. So it is creating a feel, an emotional connection. And I use that in my teaching CE classes to agents with a 3-hour, it's a 3-hour CE. And we're talking about the 90-10 rule. So what that means is only 90% of the population really can see things three-dimensional. What they see is what they get. So if they can see it, it's much easier for them to imagine that this could be the new space. If
Right.
it is completely vacant and is not it is not showcasing the emotional clues, they will have a much harder time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, general tips for prepping to sell or rent, and I did a little note and I said including during the holiday or seasonal times. So a lot of us hear about decluttering. A lot of us have too much stuff. Our sellers, owners have too much stuff. What kind of general tips can you give us?
Well, that one is absolutely a given. Less is more. The interesting part is that often when people go through that process, and it has to be done no matter what, it's like speeding it up because it helps you later on that the move out is easier if you still live in the property during that sales process. So it helps you to minimize, and it is freeing. It is actually a freeing concept as well. And the rule is always, the 3 different boxes. You have your trash, you have your donation, and you have the keep. And going through that is a big part. If you have, if the house had been renovated or furnished, several years ago, having light linen and bedding is a key part. And then utilizing some accent pillows to really bring a little bit more the up-to-date trend. Specifically in bedrooms, that can make a huge difference. And it is not a huge investment, and also something you might want to take with you to your next home.
Right.
Same is for bath towels and possibly some white fabric, good quality shower curtains. That with, possibly a simple solution might be a white orchid. Some simple elements utilized on a large counter in a bathroom can be a nice add-on. If that bathroom is freshly remodeled, we often defer and don't put anything in because it's the beauty of itself. However, as older the renovation is in the past, it is much better. It needs a little bit more help.
Our listeners are going to want to take you along to their listing presentations. You did such a great job of explaining this. And I love what you said about it's getting you ready to move. If you haven't already moved yet, at least you're organized and you know where things are. I know I mentioned earlier your website is fantastic. And you talk about a Brookhaven home. And those of you who are not from the Atlanta area, Brookhaven is a area of Atlanta, very nice area. And you talk about tips to modernize a traditional home. And again, that website was homedesign2sell.com. That was the number 2. But some things that you talk about in that article are minimizing and decluttering, focusing on the fireplace, mixing and matching, and layering textures.
Yeah. So to modernize and update an existing a house who has been, not touched for a while, a couple of things you can do is, number one, I mentioned the white bedding. So that's a great change. And then paired with a couple of accent pillows, perfect. Sink if you go into a beautiful hotel, like a 4-star hotel. Similar feeling, you see how the bed's set up, it creates a certain emotional connection. Same is for the bathroom, investing in a couple of really lush towels. That's perfect, and it's a wonderful investment as well. Even like a little white orchid. That is a nice add-on. I mentioned the lampshades, the accent, even if you have the darker brown sofas and love seat. A couple of pillows and a throw can make a difference. So I think that's definitely a couple of things which can be used. In layering the textures, it is often, I call it, we're going on a treasure hunt, or the team goes to a treasure hunt because there might be items in other rooms which have a much better purpose in others. So switching out some inventory, trying to create this cohesive feel, looking at a couple of layering of textures, because that is an emotional connection versus it feeling bare. That all creates a lifestyle feel.
Right. Well, Barbara, you've been a treasure trove of information for us today. Again, I can't thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it so much. And if a listener, if a viewer wishes to obtain more information, if they're looking to hire your team to help them, should they go to the website? Is that the best thing?
That's the best way, yeah. www.homedesign, then number 2, cell.com. And Derek, it was a pleasure being here, enjoyed it, and thank you for inviting me today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening and viewing, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Game Plan Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.